Okay. As it's been a difficult few weeks in terms of discourse and legislation around our trans siblings. And so I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to hear from our trans brothers about visibility, love, joy, and healing. So thank you so much for this. So ha sido unas semanas bien difícil escuchando los discursos y las leyes que están tratando de pasar, que están llenas de odio en contra de nuestra comunidad trans. Y estoy tan agradecida de tener la oportunidad de escuchar y aprender de nuestros hermanos trans y sobre la visibilidad, el amor, la alegría y la sanación. Así que muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Yo soy Maritza Martínez, soy la directora ejecutiva de Somos Familia, y en Somos Familia nuestra misión es construir liderazgo en nuestras familias y comunidades latinex para crear una cultura donde las personas de diversos géneros y orientaciones sexuales pueden prosperar. So I'm Maritza Martinez, the executive director of Somos Familia. And at Somos Familia, our mission is to build leadership in our Latinx families and communities to create a culture where people of diverse genders and sexual orientations can thrive. Somos una organización intergeneracional basada en la comunidad, y de este modelo surgió un programa increíble que fue fundado por dos personas que están aquí hoy, dos miembros de Somos Familia, Carlos Gómez Arteaga y Alexander González, que van a escuchar más esta noche. So we're an intergenerational and community-based organization, and out of this model grew this incredible program founded by two people who are here today, Carlos Gómez Arteaga and Alexander González, who you'll hear more from today. And the program is called Apoyo Fénix. It's a safe space for trans masculine Latine to discuss their needs, support each other, share resources, connect with affirming services that are culturally competent in the community. So el programa se llama Apoyo Fénix y es un espacio seguro para que les latines transmasculines hablen sobre sus necesidades, se apoyen mutuamente y se conecten con recursos y servicios que son culturalmente apropiados para su comunidad. Y también quiero tomar unos momentos para agradecerle al equipo de planificación que hizo este evento posible hoy, esta noche, que incluyen las dos personas que ya mencioné, Alex y Carlos, también Jay Salazar, Cielo Flores y Leo Cuevas. So muchas gracias. I want to take a moment to thank the planning team that made today possible. And that includes the two folks I mentioned, Carlos and Alex, but also Jay Salazar, Cielo Flores, and Leo Cuevas. So thank you so much for making that possible. Antes de continuar, quiero presentar a nuestros intérpretes para que todo el mundo no tenga que hablar en dos idiomas. So before we begin, I want to introduce our interpreters for today, Andrea and Anabel. So not everyone has to speak in two languages for the rest of the event. They're gonna help us out. So le paso la palabra a Andrea y Anabel.
Gracias, muchas gracias, Maritza. Queremos también extender la bienvenida y voy a repasar unas instrucciones para poder seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, así que si prefieren comunicarse en inglés o en español, van a poder hacer esto. So thanks so much, Maritza, and I'm going to go over some brief instructions on how to select your language of preference on Zoom so that you can either speak in English or in Spanish. Since this is probably a lot of people who are bilingual, we're going to ask that you please select a language and try to stick to that language if you're on that channel. So if you've chosen the English channel, speak in English. And if you decide you want to speak in Spanish, switch over to the Spanish channel. That way we don't get our wires crossed. Y como probablemente esta es una audiencia bilingüe, vamos a pedir que seleccionen un idioma y que si han seleccionado, por ejemplo, inglés, se mantengan en el canal hablando en inglés. Y si deciden hablar en español, seleccionen el canal de español para no cruzarnos cuando estamos interpretando y también comunicándonos en estos idiomas. Así que si ustedes están participando a través de una computadora, pueden ver ahora mismo un globo terráqueo, o puede ser que vean 3 puntos en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Seleccionen ese globo terráqueo, esos 3 puntos, y van a ver la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Seleccionen español y tienen la opción de silenciar el audio original. Esto es para solo escuchar español y no escuchar inglés al fondo a un volumen más bajo. Si están participando a través de una tableta, un iPad, un teléfono inteligente, pueden tocar su pantalla suavemente, seleccionen el menú de 3 puntos que van a ver. Eso los llevará a otro menú desplegable. Seleccionen interpretación de idiomas y pueden seleccionar español. Al hacer esto, seleccionen finalizar o done, y también tienen la opción de silenciar el audio original. Si están usando una Chromebook o participando a través de la línea telefónica, estas opciones no están disponibles. So if you're joining us via a computer, you can look down at the bottom right-hand side of your screen and you'll be able to see a globe icon. Select that globe icon and then select the language of your choice, be that English or Spanish. And then that's all you have to do. If you're choosing English, do not mute original audio because then you won't be able to hear. And if you're joining us via a tablet or a smartphone, touch your screen lightly right now. You'll see a 3-dot menu on the bottom of your screen. Select that 3-dot menu. It will take you to another menu that has the option for language interpretation. Select English and then select done, and you're ready to go. If you're using a Chromebook or the phone line to call into Zoom, these options are not available to you. And if you have any tech issues, please let us know in the chat so that we can try to assist you. Si tienen alguna dificultad tecnológica, háganos saber en el chat para poder ayudarles. Y le regreso la palabra a Maritza.
Gracias. Aha, okay. I'm going to do this in English since we have interpretation. So now it's my job and my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Pau Lagarde. I have known Pau since 2016 when he joined Somos Familia. He later joined our board and left our board and was a critical part of our pandemic team. So I'm really grateful for him for that reason. That was my alarm to call my mom, if you heard that. He even created a podcast with his parents to talk about their journey of, him coming out and them becoming advocates for the trans community. It's in Spanish, so check it out. And right now, Pau is a graduate student. He is working on his master's in social work at Portland State University with the career goal of becoming a licensed clinical social worker and providing gender affirming care to our community. So thank you, Pau, for the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you for being here and thank you for guiding us in this important conversations. I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. And now I will unpin myself and mute. Gracias.
Thank you, Maritza. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to today's talk. I'm going to be asking or talking in English and allowing our interpreters to do their magic with the Spanish speaking folks. So today, I want to welcome everyone to today's presentation, Los Chicos Presentes, a talk centering transmasculine Latines. As Maritza mentioned, I'm a Somos Familia member, a former board member with Somos Familia. Today, we're also celebrating the annual Transgender Day of Visibility. It is a time to celebrate our transgender and gender diverse friends, family, and community members. TDOV, also known as Transgender Day of Visibility, was created to highlight the many contributions that trans folks have made to society and emphasize the continued fight for transgender rights around the world. So today we want to show our complexities and our joy. This panel is presentation challenges the invisibility of our Latine trans community, especially our Latine trans masculine folks. So I'm going to introduce our very special panelists today. They're going to individually introduce themselves further, but I'm going to first, welcome our panelist, Frankie Perez, pronounce he, him, él, from Make the Road, Nevada. And Jared Vincent from Alpha Trans in Puerto Rico Wellness Center, pronounce he, him, él. Our other panelist, Mateo Guerrero, pronounce he, him, from Make the Road, New York. And our other panelist, Alexander Gonzalez, he, him, él, from Grupo de Apoyo Phoenix, and also from Somos Familia. So I want to first welcome Frankie Perez to unmute himself and introduce himself to our audience.
Hi, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. I'm very honored to be here with you all. Again, my name is Frankie Perez, he, him pronouns. I am representing Make the Road, Nevada. But in this day, especially, I get to represent, really highlight my trans identity, right? Trans masc identity. So just a quick little bit about me. I'm an Air Force veteran. I served in the Air Force for 10 years. I served under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. And I also served as the first out trans person in my squadron. I am a father of 5 children. I adopted 5 children last year. And yeah, that's the gist of it. So thank you. And I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Frankie. Jared, would you like to introduce yourself? No te oímos, Jared.
Sí, hola. Buenas, mi nombre es Jared Vicens. Soy un chico trans de Puerto Rico. Estoy haciendo trabajo de activismo y defensor de derechos en la comunidad, especialmente de chicos trans. La comunidad de chicos trans en Puerto Rico es un poco menos visible, por decirlo de alguna manera. Así que desde el 2016 estoy haciendo trabajo con grupos que se dedicaban a la prevención del VIH y luego, ¿verdad? El año pasado pude tener la oportunidad de empezar con grupos de buscando recursos para abrir proyectos para chicos trans y las necesidades que tienen. Así que nada, vamos de poquito en poquito creando camino para los chicos. Un placer estar aquí.
Y Jared, gracias. Our next panelist is Mateo Guerrero.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Mateo, he, they pronouns. I'm a Make the Road, New York. And a little bit about myself. I've been organizing for a minute. I started organizing around 2011. And part of my introduction to organizing was around immigrant rights. And as time has gone by, most of my work now is at the intersection of trans and queer identities and migration, from deportation defense to passing legislation in the city and state to protect trans and queer communities. One of the biggest bills that we have in the state of New York is that we're fighting for is to decriminalize sex work, because we know how many folks in our communities are a part of the trades. I myself was a go-go dancer, and so that is a part of, it's a part of our fight. And also I'm a lover, I'm a cat dad, I'm a climber, and working to create inclusion in the outdoors for our people. Yeah, that's it.
Ooh, to cat tats out there. Thank you, Mateo. Our next panelist is Alexander Gonzalez, de Grupo de Apoyo Phoenix y Somos Familia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think two parts of me that I am very proud is one, being a trans man, and the other part is that I was born in Mexico. And I love my culture. I love my community. I graduated from UC Berkeley as an adult transfer, so that was pretty exciting for me. Never thought I made it to university, but I was able to get through it. That was very exciting. I've been working with Somos Familia first as a volunteer for a few years, and then I started working with them as a community education. And after I graduated from UC Berkeley, one of my things that I realized coming out of there is that I needed support for me where I can understand and communicate with folks, both Spanish or Spanglish, but also that I can understand with folks about my culture, my community, my parents, the family around us. The way that we interact with each other is definitely different than other folks. And being able to have access to that was very important. So that's why we created Grupo de Apoyo Phoenix to support trans Latinx men in Spanish, English, Spanglish. But the biggest thing that connects us is that culture and that realization of one time Frankie here said he was so proud to see so many brown faces in one screen at a time when it came to a support group. And that to me was a really proud moment to hear that from someone in the community. Thank you.
You, Alex. And, that leads us into our discussion. Today's conversation is a plática, right? It's a talk amongst brothers, amongst community, amongst family. So we welcome the audience. We welcome the community to our talk, to our space, to join in. And thank you to those who, put in their questions for us. We will be answering some of those questions later today. And, you mentioned, Alex, about culture and why it's important, right? And I want to touch on the gender roles and how they vary among our cultures, right? And, gender roles include things like behaviors, attitudes, and values that a culture expects you to have based on your gender, right? So how many Latine transmasculine people don't entirely conform to the typical binary heteronormative gender roles, right? So because being masculine, transmasculine doesn't dictate which gender roles someone does or doesn't follow. So transmasculine people don't always follow what's expected of quote unquote men or associated with quote unquote masculinity, right, in their culture. So my first question to the panelists is, how can we as Latine people be more inclusive and accepting beyond the binary, male and female? And why is mainstream society more tolerant and less policing of masculine expression than of feminine expression? And feel free to jump in, whoever feels comfortable answering this question or would like to add to it. And let me know if you would like me to repeat myself.
I'll go ahead and answer first. This is Frankie. I think that unfortunately white supremacy is global. And so with that, no matter what countries we come from or our parents, our family come from, no matter what languages we speak. That's just what is so intertwined with so much of that kind of patriarchy, that the more acceptance of masculinity versus femininity, to prioritize masculinity, right? And so, yeah, I think that it's something that we have to be conscious of in our daily lives. Also, I think it can be so powerful sometimes that we almost want it in certain areas, right? To kind of give us this gender euphoria for some, to kind of validate our gender expression and experience. And so I think as long as we can be very conscious that we're not perpetuating the toxic traits of that, then we can celebrate it, right? Like I thank you for bringing that up, Alex. Like I do remember that first time joining the meeting and seeing, I was so happy to see literally everybody there was a trans masc brown person, you know, and I use brown, you know, I know not everybody, I know that's a word that people can choose to identify with, but Latine, right? And it was a beautiful thing. And so, yeah, I think as long as we just be conscious of that, then we can definitely celebrate all that beautiful stuff within that.
Yanis, I see your hand up.
Voy a abundar un poco rapidito. Creo que lo que nos define como masculinidad en los hombres trans es como un doble filo, ¿verdad? A veces queremos encajar un recuadro sobre la cultura que arrastramos, ¿verdad? Sobre encajar en un patrón de que tenemos que ser masculinos, de que tenemos que ser incluso heterosexuales, que tenemos que tener unos rasgos, un comportamiento, ¿verdad? Y a veces un comportamiento más correcto. Y a veces tratando de encajar en estas casillas de no binario, tenemos que tener mucho cuidado con lo que realmente nosotros queremos y sentimos, porque nos podemos salir, ¿verdad? de ese centro, de nuestra esencia, de esa transición de que nos tomó tanto tiempo, ¿verdad? A adoptar y creer y llevar, y que la gente pudiera entender que a veces se vale virar un poco para atrás y volver a las raíces y no querer encajar tanto ¿verdad? en esa toxicidad masculina. Y pienso que a diferencia de las mujeres, a veces se nos hace mucho más fácil encajar o pasar en la sociedad. Ellas a veces, las mujeres trans a veces, ¿verdad? Tienen unos rasgos que no debería ser lo que justifica un hombre, una mujer o una mujer trans o un hombre trans, pero la sociedad se encarga de como si estuviéramos en una pasarela, ver qué tenemos, qué nos falta, qué no tenemos, qué tenemos de más en el peso, en la estatura, en el color del pelo, el color de la piel. Y pasa lo mismo, pienso, en la comunidad trans con las chicas, que entonces el chico pasa, no hay problema, no tienes que decir que eres un hombre trans, pero con las chicas somos machistas, ahí tienes que decirlo, tienes que seguir luchando, tienes que, ¿verdad? Pelear por todo. Así que un poco de, ¿verdad? Esa cultura que llevamos arrastrando.
Yeah, and you know, folks have been right on with their comments, and I think it's kind of like to share, right? Like we live in a very patriarchal, sexist society where there is a tremendous and concerning level of femicides in which women and femininity are bearing the tremendous level of violence. And part of that is because part of patriarchy is deciding like how a woman should look, what are the things a woman should do, how would a woman behave, right? And there's those levels of standards are the levels in which trans women are transitioning into, right? A world that is already significantly violent towards femininity, the expression of femininity in general. And I think that results, right, in the impact of trans femicides. Now, for trans men, I'm in the opinion that like it doesn't really, for society and the world, it doesn't really matter how we look. We can be short, tall, like bald, hairy, have a beard, not have a beard, have a mustache, not have a mustache. Society does not care. We're not facing the same levels of violence. Now, I'm not saying there's no violence. I'm saying not the same levels of violence that transgender women are facing. Patriarchy is built in such a way where trans masc folks are not transitioning into the standards that trans women are transitioning into. And for folks who are non-binary, who express themselves in a realm of a mix of masculinity and femininity, then end up facing the violence of expressing their femininity or that a different like non-masculine expression, right? And so I think part of the way that I think about things is like, how do we as trans men question this patriarchy? How do we redefine our masculinity so that masculinity can be in solidarity with folks who are at the hands of patriarchal violence? And what are the places in which we already are a part of that we can deconstruct to make space?
Thank you, Mateo, which leads me into, the question of like, why is visibility of Latine transmasculine people important? And if folks want to add on to, because you touched on some of the key issues that Latine transmasculine people face and trans and non-binary folks in general face, but why is visibility important, or is visibility important at all for you, as transmasculine people?
I could get started on this. Yeah, I mean, visibility, I know, at least personally for me, from my own experience, has always been very important. I've always made sure that when I'm introducing myself or wherever I'm going, that I know that at least that I'm around community, that I'm around people that matter, or even doing the work that I do. I've always made sure that I'm clear that I present myself as a trans man. But that matters to me a lot because of just a lot of the research and work that I did when I was in school, trying to find resources and trying to find information that was specifically for trans Latinx man or for trans man when I needed information or resources about sexual health, HIV information, or any of stuff that had to do with my personal health. I couldn't find the resources that were needed specifically for me. And the reason that I kept getting told is because they didn't know. A lot of doctors still tell me now these days that they didn't know that trans men have different sexualities. They don't understand the risks that we run as far as having relationships with other people. So if they don't know that we exist, if they don't know our needs, if they're not even trying themselves hard enough to figure out what our needs are, then we have to speak out. We have to speak out about our needs, and not just because us, but because of the rest of our community that's coming after us, right? We want to make sure that the rest of the trans young folks that are coming, the next generation, is going to have better access to the healthcare that they need. It's going to have better access to sexual health education. and it's going to have their needs respected better within the medical community and not just be a recycle of all the other folks that they're taking care of and trying to figure out how we fit within that area. It's like, no, we have to, the healthcare has to be specifically for us. But unless that we push them, unless that we say, no, trans men have different needs, folks are not going to be doing anything. And that's on my part. That's why I think it's important for us to be out there and for us to put ourselves and speak out more.
I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I had the experience of like kind of being put in a situation, right, where I had to be visible, right, to really have my needs as a trans man met. But it's like, what about for those that cannot, right? That they live in a place, in a state that just does not create that space for them to be visible, you know, or to be able to advocate for themselves. You know, I feel like the conversation around visibility has shifted a lot recently, especially with a lot of, you know, a lot of these like anti-trans legislation being put against us. And so, you know, do you feel like the conversation around visibility has shifted at all? Go ahead, Jetta.
Ya. No estaba seguro si me escuchaban, tuve problemas. Creo que definitivamente las noticias y los headlines, ¿verdad? Causan mucho temor entre las personas trans, sobre todo, ¿verdad? Por los views anti-trans que están ocurriendo. Pienso que ahí es donde entramos nosotros como partes visibles de la comunidad y como en esa representación, porque mucha gente a veces no sabe el significado que tienen estas leyes, estas cosas que están ocurriendo. Y necesitan, ¿verdad? Ver una imagen que puedan seguir, una persona que les sirva como de guía, no de modelo, sino como de guía, ¿verdad? Y pienso que es sumamente importante el papel que hacen todos ustedes, ¿verdad? Al ser visibles y darse a conocer como hombres trans, para que estos chicos que están comenzando el tratamiento o están por comenzar el tratamiento o ya están y se sienten que están a mitad de ese tratamiento, no se quiten, no se dejen. El miedo siempre va a estar, siempre a lo desconocido y siempre a todo, le tememos a todo y eso es parte de la vida, el tener miedo es lo que hace que sintamos que estamos vivos, que algo se está moviendo, que algo está pasando. Si no tuviéramos miedo, pues, ¿verdad? Estaríamos vacíos, pero tiene que ser un miedo a crecer, un miedo a ser visible, un miedo a querer luchar, a que no sabemos qué pueda pasar en el futuro, pero que sea con una visión de inclusión, de lo que estaba hablando Alexander, de que tenemos que por los que vienen detrás de nosotros, tenemos que ir a las citas médicas, tenemos que poner a los médicos en esa, contra la pared, sobre todo los ginecólogos. Tenemos que educarlos. Somos chicos trans, pero tenemos un derecho a cuidarnos, a proteger nuestro cuerpo. Y ahí entran muchas cosas de burocracia y planes médicos. No sé si pueda compartir algo muy rápido. Cuando yo hice mi proceso de cambio de género y de nombre, me pasó algo muy curioso con el plan. Y el plan médico me decía que si yo quería que ellos me cambiaran el marcador de género a masculino, significaba que cuando yo tuviese que ir a un ginecólogo o a hacerme alguna radiografía del pecho o de glándulas mamarias o cualquier cosa, pues entonces tenía que costearlo porque para el plan, si yo era un hombre, no necesitaba ginecología, no necesitaba estas otras cosas, ¿verdad? Internas. Entonces, para efectos de documentación, yo soy un hombre, pero para efectos del plan médico, ellos siguen poniéndome un marcador interno para ellos poder facturar femenino. Y es bien curioso porque llevo años con el cambio y aún así es para efectos del plan, soy una chica. Para efectos de mi identificación, soy un hombre. Para mí, soy un hombre. Pero para efectos de que ellos puedan cobrar, pues, ¿verdad? Y es una cosa que hay que educarse, que hay que educar a los médicos, que hay que educar a los planes médicos, que hay que educar a los chicos que están empezando el proceso y no saben cómo identificarse o no saben, tienen miedo a esto mismo, a quedarse sin un plan médico o sin servicios vitales. Así que yo, por ejemplo, hago esto, doy visibilidad. No se me hace fácil hablar ¿verdad? En público, no se me da tan fácil hablar con mucha gente, pero lo hago porque mi proceso fue difícil y pienso que el que viene detrás, si yo pienso más que en mi proceso, se me va la parte humana. Como que si yo pienso más que en mí, en que ya yo pasé unas etapas y pienso en el que viene detrás, pues hay algo que no está bien. Y pienso que esto es como una continuidad. Yo lo hice para mí, lo hago para otro, y quizás ese otro lo hace para otro. Y así, ¿verdad? Así vamos creando lazos y un poquito más de claridad para, ¿verdad? Como que estamos aquí. Y disculpa que me extendiera tanto.
Okay, thank you. Mateo?
I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say that I struggle with the question of visibility. I do tremendously. I think for visibility, there is a space, there's a moment, there's a question of positionality that we have to think about. I'll confess that in the climbing world, I lead with I am a trans man that climbs because there are two and one of them is white. I'm playing, there are more. The one that just won the climb, which is a brown trans man, and that was so lovely to see on TV. But yeah, there's no trans men, there's no trans folks climbing, right? And I think in my climbing career, if I can call it a career, but I'm all right. But in the climbing world, like I lead with I'm a trans person of color. I was undocumented. I lead with my identities. I lead with my pride of being trans. In the work that I do, right? Everyone knows I'm trans, whomever I work with, but it is hard for me to claim visibility when the majority, like 99% of the people that I work with are trans women who have been incarcerated, who have faced violence, who are sex workers, who are undocumented, who can't adjust their immigration status because their records and records that have been as a result of their trans identity, folks that just came out of detention, folks whose experience feels really hard for me to say, I'm gonna go be visible and take up this space, when the reality is I want to make sure I don't reproduce the same system of patriarchy that takes away from folks who are in the more feminine spectrum to be visible. Because, and I know this is controversial to say, but the window of visibility for trans women is a lot smaller than the window of visibility for trans men. Trans masculine folks get to have a space and be taken serious when they're sharing experiences, get to be listened to in a way that trans women have been saying the same things for decades, but only get to be listened to just now. And so I think for me, I really struggle with the question of visibility. And that's why I said I think it's a matter of like positionality and where we are, who we're with, right? Because it is true. I remember when I started my transition and I went on YouTube, and you all probably will know the same guy, that white dude that started posting like 10 years ago. That's the only person I saw. And I was like, damn, but there's no brown like trans masculine people here. And I made a video that I posted on YouTube, the one and only video that is ever out there. And and I think it was like at a moment I was like, oh my God, yeah, I don't know that trans men exist. And so it was good and important for me to see that. But in the work that I do try to be as mindful as possible that if I'm invited to speak at a panel of trans experiences, the space is for a trans woman. And I have that clear for me. And I know that's controversial to say, but I think that the way that I see my role as a trans masculine person in the world is, how can I support behind scenes to create the structure for folks who have been historically invisibilized a lot more than myself, for the myriad identities that they hold, for them to have the opportunity to have that platform? And how can I create and build that? So I think I do struggle, and I'm honest. And I hope that folks can extend some kindness and compassion as I share these like very raw feelings. But I think there are moments, and it's about positionality.
Thank you, Mateo. Frankie, Alex, did you want to add to this question?
I feel almost the exact same thing what Mateo was just sharing with us. But in this case, for me, it's because I'm a father now, right? So there's times where like all my kids know I'm trans. They, we've had conversations about sexuality already. Now there are different ages. They're all still very young, but I mean, my oldest is 12. She just turned 12. So we've had some pretty good conversations already. About gender, about sexuality, about just a bunch of things, right? And there are times where, I have my trans flag and the rainbow flags or whatever else, right? And we're celebrating or we're going to an event or we're doing this. But I'm also very cautious as well. Like, I won't put any stickers on my car, because I have my babies in the car, and so as much as I want to be like loud and proud, I also have to consider their safety. And then to even add more layers, like my children are mixed. A few of my kids are very dark skinned, right? They're Black. And so, there's another layer to that, right? And so like, I am constantly having to think about how and where I'm representing my trans identity, right? Because like same, I'm very proud. Like this is a part of my identity. In fact, I usually put trans Latinx, trans Latine first, right? And because for me, it took a long time for me to get to here. And I'm so proud of myself for making it here and, continuing just life in general. But now I'm a dad, right? So now it's like, oh my gosh, I have these babies. And so, yeah, and then on top of that, like Mateo was saying, the positionality, the privileges that we hold when it comes to, when we think about trans identities in general. But yeah, so for me, visibility can definitely be a little complex. It can definitely depend. when thinking about safety and my kids and my family.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said earlier, right? Like when I'm speaking about visibility, that's why I'm very specific of like, I'm speaking about myself and my experience and what I've gone through and done. One of the things that I realized going through community college is that there was no one having the conversation, and maybe they were not having the conversation because of fear. Maybe they were not having the conversation because they were worried of putting themselves out there, right? But no one was speaking out about that there was not a single gender neutral bathroom in the whole like Berkeley Community College, right? Like I was sitting down to 3 hours classes, having to run down to a restaurant or to a cafe to be able to access the bathroom, having to hold it, having to go through infections and everything because in their mind, the university, this college mind, there was no need for it, right? Because no one was speaking out, no one was saying anything to them directly and pushing them in that way. So what I've been through in my life, what I lived and survived, has in some weird way put me in a position where like, you know what, fuck it, whatever happens when I put myself out there, I'm gonna do it because, again, I don't want the next generation that comes after me not being able to have access to the bathroom, not being able to have access to a space, or having to deal with all the freaking infections that I had to deal with. So I'm gonna speak out myself. I'm gonna put myself out there because of those that are not able to put their voices out there, because of those that are not able to speak out. That's the only reason why I'm putting myself out there and why I'm saying that it's important. But yes, I am not saying that everyone should put themselves out there. I'm not saying that everyone should be all like visible over there. Everyone has different ways of being. Everyone has different risks and things to take in care of their minds. But in me, like, you know, the community college ended up creating a gender neutral bathroom after I was able to speak out and after I got some support from other LGBTQ folks from the school. So now there's a gender neutral bathroom in the community college. And there was access to other spaces that they put there. But it was the same challenge going into UC Berkeley, you know, a super liberal university. And the same thing happened where I was still struggling having to find a gender neutral bathroom because I was still in the middle of that transition, right? So like what happens to our non-binary brothers and sisters that they don't fit the gender roles that people are expecting in order just to be able to access a bathroom? It's just a basic need. But again, I had to put myself and give them hell for it and ask for things and tell them what they needed to be doing better and different in order to change some things, in order for people to start actually taking it serious. But I didn't do it because I'm like, oh, I want everyone to speak out and everyone to say that what they need or everyone to know. I'm saying what I need just in the hopes that it's going to help the next person that comes after me. That's where a lot of my visibility comes when I'm talking and when I'm speaking and when I'm doing things, because I have this incredible community and this incredible circle of friends and people around me that I know that I have the support enough to help me get through things that other people might not have. So that gives me a little bit more of the strength and the power and the courage to be able to speak out in situations like that. Sorry,
Yeah,
just went
Alex,
on.
no, and I think you bring up very important points because, you know, just like you know, I find those strengths, right? Like everything that I do it with the intention of, is this going to help the next person, right? By me being present and visible and speaking out because of my privileges that I gained as a trans masculine person, and being able to present myself in the world how I want to present myself. Like, how is this going to help my community? Is this going to help the next person? And so thank you for bringing that up. And I think, Jared, you wanted to add to this.
Nada, bien rapidito, y es que se me hace bien fácil empatizar con los dos, ¿verdad? Con Mateo, con Frankie y con Alexander, porque yo pienso que este tema de visibilidad, ninguna respuesta es incorrecta. Pienso que también depende en el momento en que estemos, ¿verdad? En este momento, al principio de mi transición, yo recuerdo haberle dicho a la gente que yo no quería que si en algún momento yo pasaba, no quería que dijeran que yo era un chico trans, pero pienso que es en los momentos que te tocan, en los momentos en los que estás, y son los que te llevan a decidir si no, si sí, y cómo y cuándo. En el caso de Frankie es bien válido que quiera proteger ahora a sus hijos, primero que nada. Y en mi caso, pues fue eso. Al principio no quería, luego vi la necesidad de la visibilidad. Me pasó lo mismo que a Mateo. Pensaba que era el único, que solamente habíamos 5 chicos trans en todo Puerto Rico. Así que pienso que la lucha es en el momento que te toca y con lo que tú estés viviendo, porque sí hay veces que tenemos que proteger y nos sentimos en esa capa protectora de proteger a los que nos rodean, a los que queremos, a los que pues y entonces decidimos cuán visibles somos y para quiénes. Así que es también tema de en el momento que te toque. Gracias.
Thank you, Jared. And, we're talking a lot about, how are we presenting ourselves, but also like what has helped us, right, in our process in this journey. And a lot of it is community, right? And so for y'all, like, how do you build community? What does community mean to you? And especially now, why is mutual aid more important now more than ever?
We can do like rock, paper, scissors until I don't know. I mean, I think I'm gonna speak as someone who is in New York, and that comes with a lot of privilege. I migrated to the US in 2010, and I found Make the Road, and Make the Road New York was the first place where I met trans women, that I had the opportunity to meet trans women. And we're a large crew. We roll deep. There are so many trans folks around me that, I think like one of my mentors was like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And I was like, "I'm gonna go with Mateo." And she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Wait, that's it? Like, you're not gonna ask me anything else?" And she's like, "Why would I ask you more questions? That's what you go by." And I was like, "Oh shit, this is cool." So I'm coming from a place where like a lot of my people around me like are trans identified and are organizing around trans issues. And so I think for me, I think community, I think I was somehow I just landed in como en el centro, in the center of trans queer immigrant New York, like Jackson Heights. Like whenever you walk in Jackson Heights, like you will see trans folks like all the time. And I think like that to me was like a community that I was given by the fact of just like finding like a place that supported undocumented folks. Now, I think when it comes to the climbing world, I think that has been a little bit more challenging. Climbing is a very white sport. It's a very expensive and inaccessible sport. I am fortunate that I don't have to pay for a membership. But the reality is that it's very hard to access as a brown person, as a migrant person, as a trans person. And so to build community has had to be more intentional, has had to be reach out one-to-one to folks that I'm able to run into Instagram while scrolling. When I see like that the hashtag trans climber, I'm like, okay, let me talk to this person. Let me find out who they are. Let me see what state they're in. And try to make connections and build spaces to get together, to hang out. And I think that is a community that has been harder for me to create. But to be honest, like the community here in New York saved my life. I didn't know trans men existed. And the first conversation that I had with trans women were like, they were telling me about hormones and surgeries. And I was like, wow, that shit is cool. I wish I could do the same thing. And, you know, after going on YouTube for 1 million hours, I found out actually, yeah, we can exist. But it's a community that saved my life, that taught me how to organize, that taught me that my identities are valid, that I matter in this world. And so I think, yeah, I don't know, I went on like a random thoughts, and I'm just gonna end there. But yeah, the community has saved my life. And I will share this. I organized the trans, what we're called the Trans Immigrant Project in the New York location. And I organized a climb day with the girls, and I was so rad. So many of them came out, and one of them was like, she arrived, she's like, oh, Mateo, check it out. I cut my nails. I'm really finding my femininity. I'm ready to do this. And she crushed hard, man. Like she really like climbed like multiple times. She had more energy that I even tried to predict. So I think it's like how to, thinking about community and creating intersectional spaces to build communities across different realms.
Yeah, 100%. Alex or Sanki, how do you build community, and why is mutual aid important?
Oye, bueno, para mí la comunidad, como dije ahorita, de pensar que existíamos 5 hombres trans en todo Puerto Rico, a saber que somos muchos, y que cada vez que se le extiende la mano a uno, aparecen 10. Y es algo, ¿verdad?, que va creciendo. Pienso que es importante. Pienso que crear comunidad es como enlazarlo con la visibilidad. Creo que te haces visible, haces que las chicas y los chicos sean visibles para crear una comunidad sana. Y creo que es bien importante, sobre todo, crear una comunidad de lo que sea, de alpinismo, de chicos trans, de barberos, de beautician, de lo que sea. Es importante crear la comunidad con la que uno se sienta identificado, porque es lo que nos ayuda a la salud mental, es lo que salva vidas, es lo que hace que uno se mantenga sano, es lo que hace que uno quiera vivir, que quiera experimentar cosas, que quiera lograr metas, que quiera construir, que quiera progresar, ser alguien, ayudar. Así que la comunidad que sea la que te ayude como persona, pienso que es la correcta, no hay comunidades incorrectas. Y si tienden a compartir algún proceso similar, pues creo que ayuda muchísimo más.
So let me ask you this, as we're building community and, reaching our support to those that really need it, how do we ensure that our Afro-Black Latinx community is also included in these conversations and in these spaces?
So I think on this question, just in my experiences, is making sure that we understand that is like a privilege. Like for me, saying like me as a non-Black person, right? Like, so, and being intentional with like wording and being intentional with like hashtags, where for some folks I know, like to say like Afro Latinx, Afro Latine, and asking folks a part of that community, what hashtags do you want to use? What language do you want me to use? And just making sure, like even with imaging, right? Like if the image has a silhouette of a person, like it shouldn't always be somebody that looks like they have straight hair, right? We need to add an afro or braids or just any different kind of representation to make sure that folks are seeing themselves, right? Knowing they're a part of it, knowing like even when we want to draw people on something to say, well, we're building people power. If they're all different shades of brown, which is great, but I'm like, we got to make sure we have Black folks in there too. Like we need to have it all the way through, right? So I think just really being intentional and making sure that our words, our imaging, and that when Afro Latina folks do join us, do join whatever like group or or whatever the conversations it's having, that they are centered and that we're not taking up that much space in that like, because in this case, right, it would be, that's where our privilege really comes into, so yeah.
Sorry, I want to answer also, just going back a little bit as to why mutual aid was important now more than ever. I know that it just seemed like, since everyone else is saying that the pandemic is over, right? But the fact was that for this amount of time that the pandemic was going on, there was so many of our Latinx community, especially of our trans community, that did not have access to housing, that did not have access to mental health, that did not have access to food. And it kept seeing like, it kept being like an afterthought, right? Like everyone kept saying about finding resources for our community, and raising money for the LGBTQ plus community. But then our community kept being left behind. It took so much during the pandemic, because no matter how hard I try to find resources for mental health, when some of the guys in our group were in crisis or were struggling, and I kept reaching out to other LGBTQ organizations about finding resources for them about mental health in Spanish, and no one can get me information, or no one could have the resources, or they just kept saying that the money wasn't there, or that they didn't have the people available that speak Spanish. And it's like, so what happens there, right? So do we just leave them on their own? As us, as trans folks, as trans Latinx, no, that's family, right? Like that's our community, that's our chosen family. So we're not gonna leave them behind. So a lot of that stuff ended up being, again, going back to building community, right? Like it came back down to me to being on the phone with folks for an hour, hour and a half, just like listening and making sure that they were okay, making sure that they at least had an ear to talk or someone to let them know that everything was going to be okay. Right. And that's where like it came to mutual aid, right? Like I was there listening to folks, and then Somos Familia and Marixa and Carlo and the other folks in our community, they would listen to me. So it kept going in that circle, right? Because like if they didn't have the access to mental health, then we had to find a way to provide it. And all the other support groups around, especially where the majority are white folks, I kept getting told that we were not supposed to give out that kind of support, that we're not supposed to talk to folks when they're in crisis, that we're supposed to refer them to somewhere else. Where do you refer people that only speak Spanish? Like, where's the resources in the community for them, right? So I was there to listen to them. My community was there to listen to me and help me get the energy and the strength to keep being there for them. So the mutual aid, the importance of it, there was no other time that was more clear that during that time, during the pandemic, it's like everything really came to life. But remember, we already had these resources. We've been doing mutual aid for ourselves when it comes to supporting each other through surgeries, when it comes to supporting each other through information, when it comes to supporting each other through language. We had the resources, we knew the information of how to use those connections. We just didn't have the funding. And that is something that it's always seems to be that it's going to be needed for our community. But I feel like that's one of the biggest strengths for us, right? In our community is that strength of mutual aid that we have for each other.
Thank you, Alex. Gareth, did you want to add to that? And also, how can, as we're building mutual aid and support for our communities, how can we make sure that they include, and center our Afro Black Latinx community? Because definitely resources and funding are needed, but, I want to make sure that we're also centering those that really need it.
Es bien difícil hablar de necesidades y las necesidades que no se cubren o que no se consiguen por acceso a idioma. Es difícil, pienso, para ustedes que están en Estados Unidos, que hay mucha comunidad latina, y lo pienso yo estando en Puerto Rico, que básicamente nuestro idioma es español y todo el mundo habla español, y aún así hay tantas necesidades que no se consiguen dentro de la comunidad porque muchos de los grants y de las becas que se llenan son para procesos de la transición, para procesos que están tan arriba, pero no se encargan de cubrir un techo, una comida, unas cosas de higiene personal, desodorante, cosas que te hacen humano, cosas que necesitas para sentirte bien contigo mismo y cosas que necesitas para atreverte a salir al público, si no te sientes limpio, si no te sientes bien contigo, esas cosas, esos detalles que consumen tanto la salud mental, que hacen que una sola pieza que esté fuera de sitio
es tan difícil llegar a acceder a estos recursos que se necesitan y a conseguir estos recursos cuando la mayoría de las organizaciones y de los fondos que se consiguen son para hormonas, para operaciones, para todas estas cosas que si no tienen lo básico, si una persona no se siente bien consigo mismo, si no tiene un techo seguro, si no tiene un plato de comida, si no es una persona sociable, ¿cómo tú quieres que llegue a estas cosas que sí van a hacer que la persona se sienta bien consigo misma? Pero si no tiene unas cosas y hay ahí viene mucha de nuestra frustración en conseguir esas cosas para poderlas proveer a los chicos que no tienen. Y a veces, como decía Alexander, a veces necesitamos ser el recurso de esas personas y darles la mano, pero necesitamos también que alguien sea el recurso de nosotros para nosotros poder descargar también a veces esas impotencias que sentimos a veces de no poder cumplir en ayudar a todo el mundo, porque no tenemos los recursos, no sabemos dónde buscar. Y creo que viene con ese sentido de impotencia y de frustración. Y hay que empezar a pensar un poquito más en las cosas básicas, en lo básico, para poder, ¿verdad?, pensar en lo grande. Exacto, rapidito.
Thank you, Janet. I want to give Mateo an opportunity to answer to this.
There's something that Alexander mentioned and maybe think about the question of like, who is the pandemic over for? Because it is not over for so many communities. And I think in linking it back to the question, sorry, my cat is now throwing hands at me. But one of the things that like, you know, did you hear him? Anyway, sorry, distracted all the time. But yeah, the pandemic is not over, particularly for Black Latinx, Afro Latinx communities. You know, and it is not just what happened during the pandemic, but what is being structurally happening for our like Black Latinx communities, right? And so I think, and when we're thinking about resources, if there are resources, how do we distribute them to prioritize those that are the most impacted, those that are at the intersection of being Black and Latinx, right? Like those that are the intersection of having had experience with the incarceration system, those that have been detained. Like how do we prioritize the resources that we're able to obtain, whether it is to access to health, housing, et cetera, to prioritize them. But one of the things, most of my role, we do provide at Make New York mutual aid support, but most of the role that I play is around community organizing and how we organize long-term so that we're not trying to just figure out how to provide for ourselves, but that we force the state to provide to our communities what they owe us. And so I think in the process of organizing to end evictions, organizing, and for some context, like New York State, we were able to win a fund for excluded workers at $2.1 billion that facilitated $15,000 for undocumented folks. In that fund, we made sure that trans folks, sex workers were included to access those funds, right? And so I think when we're organizing in the many campaigns that we had to make New York, like ending evictions for units for apartment buildings that have less than 6 units, to pass an unemployment bridge program so that undocumented folks can have access to. Oh, I heard my voice twice. So they can have access to some sort of unemployment support for folks to have access to Coverage for All, which is a campaign for health access, that when we are organizing for those campaigns, it centers trans folks, it centers Black folks, it centers Latinx folks, and particularly folks who are at the intersection of being Afro-Latinx. And the way to do that is by doing leadership development. How can we make sure that if we're asking that someone speaks at a rally about the importance of having health access and health insurance as an undocumented person and as a trans person, that we are supporting their leadership to be there, knowing what they're doing, and not because we're asking them just to do it, or like how we're supporting their leadership for them to dictate how we organize. And that is, right, like how do we center those that have been the most impacted? And that is back to the question, like Afro-Latinx communities that are trans are consistently being hyper-policed, oftentimes don't have the language to fight back against what the abuses of police that they're doing. Like one of the cases that we had recently, one of the like Afro-Latinx sex workers was almost evicted from her house because she was working from her house, right? And they are highly policed, right? And so how do we make sure that as we are fighting to support them, we also provide leadership development, and we work on campaigns that are intersectional and highlight those that have been left out the most?
Thank you, Mateo. And I do want to shift gears a little bit and ask a question from the audience that came in. And it's in Spanish, so I'm going to read it in Spanish. And it's around family support. Si te sentiste resentido con tus padres por decir cosas insensibles y luego aceptaron tu identidad, ¿cómo perdonaste a ellos? Yeah. Yeah, it came in Spanish, but let me see. Well, I'm reading it as it came in, so. Oh, got you. Switching to Spanish. Okay, so la pregunta es, si te sentiste resentido con tus padres por decir cosas insensibles y luego aceptaron tu identidad, ¿cómo perdonaste a ellos?
Voy a cambiar a español. Está bien, va a dar unos segunditos. Bueno, para ser honesto, es un proceso, la manera en que yo he visto mi transición es un proceso comunitario. A mí me tomó mucho tiempo entender quién era yo, y con esa compasión en la que yo me di tiempo para entenderme a mí, es la misma compasión que le he extendido a mi madre y a mi padre, que pues a mi padre sí le tomó muchísimos más años, pero que ya está llegando a ese lugar. Y yo creo que yo soy creyente completo que nuestra comunidad tiene el poder de crecer, tiene el poder de reflexionar, de desaprender, de aprender nuevas cosas, pero tenemos que invertir en ese aprendizaje colectivo. Tenemos que dedicarle amor y ponerle compasión, y sé que es diferente para cada persona. Yo como Mateo, yo tengo la capacidad de apoyar a mi familia, a mis amistades, a mi comunidad en ese proceso. Quizás otro chique, ¿verdad? Quizás no se sienta cómodo haciendo ese proceso, o quizás le tome más tiempo perdonar a su familia o ayudar a su familia a ser parte de su proceso, y está bien. Yo pienso que para mí ha sido un proceso muy lindo ver a mi mamá crecer, porque eso es así es como lo quiero llamar. Al inicio fue difícil, al inicio mi mamá no me hablaba, ¿verdad? Pero la manera en que mi mamá comenzó a construir conmigo, me regaló la primera camisa de botones de chico que tuve en mi vida. Y bueno, la usé hasta que le salieron rotos. Pero fue ese amor que mi mamá quizás no entendía nada, ¿verdad? Quizás ella no sabía, y pues honestamente yo tampoco entendía qué era lo que yo quería. Pero mi mamá se dio a ella la paciencia para crecer, y yo le extendí la compasión para que ella creciera. Hoy en día mi mamá, Me dan ganas de llorar porque mi mamá sale con la bandera, ¿entiendes? Ella habla con padres y madres y tíos y tías y les dice, mira, a mí me tocó, me pasó, al principio fue difícil, pero estoy aquí para apoyarte y para crecer juntos. Porque no hay nada más bonito que ayudar a nuestra comunidad a aprender a apoyarse en solidaridad. Y no es solamente acerca de la identidad trans, sino que es acerca de todas las identidades, de desaprender el racismo que existe en nuestra comunidad, de desaprender la xenofobia que existe en nuestra comunidad, desaprender el clasismo, desaprender la transfobia y cómo podemos crear una comunidad en la que nos podamos apoyar y ayudar en ese nuevo crecimiento y extenderlo con compasión y con amor, que quizás tome tiempo, pero es entendiendo que es un proceso colectivo que últimamente nos va a ayudar a crear el mundo que deseamos y el mundo que nos merecemos.
Alex?
Yeah. I think it's it's a little bit more difficult for me. I'm still not at that point of family acceptance. My mom still doesn't understand who I am. She still struggles a lot with basic pronouns, my name. You know, there's a lot of things that are still really difficult for her. So it's a little bit more complicated, but what I'm trying to do my best as I see her getting older is just trying to be, I guess, a little bit more gentle on my part. And getting to the point where at least we're having conversations where at least she's not being intentionally mean. She's not being intentionally saying like, I don't care about you or I don't accept you. She's not saying that anymore, at least, you know? So I'm trying to at least give her the opportunity because I think that's one of the biggest things for us, right? Our parents are our parents and we formed that deep connection with them. So it's hard. It's harder for me to answer that question. Sorry, it's not the.
That's totally fine. Frankie or Jared?
I'm sorry. Okay. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. We'll give Frankie a chance.
Okay. Yeah, same, where it can be a little difficult, just like a little trigger warning. Won't get into details, but like, yeah, when coming out at first at 17 is what I thought was lesbian, right? Because didn't have the language for it, didn't know anything about trans anything, right? At the time. So when I came out, you know, my dad and I got into a fight. And what really scared me was, it shocked me more than anything because my dad had never hit me before like that. So I just knew I had to leave. I had to really get away from him, but also figure out what was going on with me. And that's the reason why I joined the Air Force, just to get away. And so, you know, even though, you know, after a few years, my dad wanted to be in my life, my mom did, she was like using her religion as a weapon, saying God doesn't want that. And so it was very awkward with both of my parents for a few years when I first came out at 17. So, but after years went by, they both wanted to have a relationship with me, and they were really trying to be supportive. But when I came out as trans, then, you know, that's a whole, what, like 11 years later. And they're just like, it was interesting because right away my mom was like, no, men have a penis and women have vaginas. Like, that's what it is, right? Very matter of fact. My dad was more, he was quiet. he didn't say anything. He just kind of, looked and could tell he was thinking. And I just let them know, hey, I'm just letting you know, not for your approval or for anything else. I'm just letting you know what's going on in my life, And so it took a while for both my parents to use my pronouns, my name, all this and that. But after a couple of months, my mom was honest. It was good. We were having conversations about these things. It took longer for my dad, even though we would still kind of do things together. He still wasn't using the right pronouns, the right name. And it wasn't until somebody actually said, your son, and he was kind of looking around and they were kind of confused, like, he's right here in front of you, like Frankie. And he's like, oh, and it hit him like, okay, you can continue to call me what you want. I know who I am. The world clearly sees this and knows this. And even though for those who don't see or understand, oh, can y'all hear me? Oh, there we go. That no matter what people say or do, that I know who I am and I know what I'm doing, right? And so so now I have a very close relationship with both of my parents. So I do think about the youth and the struggles they may be going through with their parents. And I think about the long journey it's been for me and my parents that, again, we can't tell anybody how to make their choices. They may never want to talk to their parents or may never want to build a relationship with them if their parents were not supportive in the beginning. However, I definitely can say, hey, I'm living proof that there's hope, like if that's what you want, and because my family and I are very tight. We're very close. And so I just, I let people know it can be different, it can. And so there's that hope that, and then also coming from a parent's point of view or thinking about how my dad, being a Chicano, first generation here in this country, and just thinking about the patriarchy or the toxic masculinity, like all these things where I have a perspective now, not to say it was okay what he did, but now I can kind of understand a little bit more of where he was coming from as well. Like it's really taught me to give grace to people and really think about everybody has their point of view and what they have going on in their head with their knowledge of what they have at the time, what they know. And I think as a parent, sometimes we kind of we just don't want anything to happen to our children, and he's expressed that finally after all these years, like he's expressed a little bit about that in his own kind of way. So it's a lot, but I definitely can say like there's that hope there,
Yeah, thank you, Frankie. And yeah, like with my dad too, yeah, a lot of, the initial resistance initiated or was stemmed by that fear, right? That fear of what will happen to my kid, right? And just not knowing enough, not understanding. Jared, I saw that you wanted to add to this as well.
Sí, yo quiero decir que ¿verdad? De todos los puntos de vista, también hay que tener una cosa clara, que a veces no podemos forzar las relaciones, a veces tenemos que dejar que las cosas ¿verdad? Sigan su curso y se den solas, que uno tenga ese sentimiento de que es el momento correcto, el tiempo correcto. Yo al principio, cuando hace 25 años atrás, y salí del closet también con este término de ser lesbiana. Y en ese momento yo me fui de mi casa y mi mamá dejó de hablarme por muchos años. Y estuvimos muchos años en el ir y venir, nos hablábamos, nos dejábamos de hablar, nos hablábamos. Más sin embargo, cuando yo le empecé mi tratamiento hormonal. Ella me puso mi primera inyección. Ella no sabía qué era, pero me la puso. Y luego más adelante yo tuve una pequeña crisis por acceso, ¿verdad? Porque no podía acceder monetariamente al medicamento. Y recuerdo que en esa conversación ella me decía como que, ¿qué te pasa? Si no me dices qué te pasa, no te puedo ayudar. Y fue algo bien difícil. Yo sentía en ese momento, creo que era una mezcla de volver quizás a decepcionarla, o que ella sintiera que había vuelto a fallar como mamá, o no sé, pero por mensaje de texto le dije que yo era trans y que había empezado mi tratamiento hormonal y quería hacer mis cambios. Y le tomó un tiempo aceptar mi nombre, pero yo me puse en su lugar, esta vez yo me puse en sus zapatos. Si a mí me había tomado 30 y tantos años, yo tengo 40, si me había tomado 30 y tantos años descubrir quién yo era y cómo yo quería ser, cómo yo le estaba pidiendo a esta persona que me había dado la vida, que durante toda la vida me llamó de una manera, me trató de una manera, como yo quería que instantáneamente ella cambiara su forma de verme. Y también es un poco, sé que nosotros queremos que nos respeten como somos, pero también tenemos que respetar ese sentido que ellos tienen de protección y a veces no digo que nos mantengamos en una relación de recibir ataques todo el tiempo, porque también se vale crear un espacio, porque no nos merecemos que nos maltraten, pero a veces hay que darle tiempo y hacerle entender por otras personas o como ellos vean que tú vas moviéndote en la vida, que no es para hacer nada malo, que es realmente sacando tu verdadera esencia como persona y queriendo ser tú y ser feliz. Pienso que dándole tiempo, hay personas que, ¿verdad? Llegan y empiezan a comprender un poco.
Quería agregar un poquito y es que cuando yo pienso acerca de la transición, también pienso en cómo el sistema de colonización impactó tanto a mi familia. Y siento como el proceso de colonización no le ha permitido a mi padre tener una masculinidad que es diferente. Y muchas veces, bueno, con mi papá fue muy difícil. Mi papá, pues sí, fue físico el tipo de violencia, ¿verdad? En el que mi mamá me decía, enciérrese en el cuarto y no salga. Y fue duro con mi padre, fue duro. Yo creo que en los momentos en que más desprecio tuve de parte de mi padre, fueron los momentos en que yo más mantuve la esperanza de que él algún día iba a comprender. Yo como Mateo. Y parte de eso es porque pienso en qué tan difícil ha sido para él como un hombre no poder expresar sus sentimientos, explorar su propia identidad, explorar su fluidez, ¿verdad? Al haber crecido en un espacio militar en el que él tenía que proveer. Y me pregunto qué tan duro fue para mi padre vivir en ese mundo. Y yo lo perdono y me tomó tiempo llegar ahí. Me tomó tiempo, es más, él le había dicho a mi mamá que se devolvieran para Colombia juntos y mi mamá dijo no, yo me quedo con mi hija en Estados Unidos. Mi papá le dijo, entonces yo sí me voy. Y mi papá no me habló por años. Y yo lo sorprendí, yo fui a Colombia, lo sorprendí, lo visité y le dije, yo a ti te amo, padre, no importa. Y yo sé que algún día tú vas a tener en tu corazón la habilidad de desaprender y aprender. Y hoy en día finalmente mi padre es parte de mi vida. Todavía estamos trabajando some kinks en algunas de las partes de esa relación, pero yo pienso en mi propio crecimiento como persona y yo soy creyente en que si invertimos en nuestras comunidades y damos y podemos plantar ese granito de reflexión, es posible que nuestras comunidades puedan ser diferentes. Ahora, ese no es el trabajo de nosotros como personas trans, ¿ok? Si nosotros no sentimos que podemos hacerlo, está bien, porque tenemos que cuidarnos, ¿verdad? Nuestro corazón y nuestro espíritu. Pero para las personas que sí tenemos esa capacidad, esa oportunidad de hacerlo, entonces podemos. Y quizás no sea yo como hijo trans, ¿verdad? Como hijo de ellas, pero quizás hubiera sido una tía o un primo, ¿verdad? Que hubiera podido tener esas conversaciones iniciales para ayudar a plantar. Pero sí, esto es un proceso comunitario y esto toma tiempo. Y está bien, pues, darse el espacio para protegerse. Y también está bien pedir apoyo de otras personas en la familia que también ayuden a cultivar ese granito de arena.
Thank you, Mateo. And I did want to acknowledge that Frankie Perez had to leave. They are a parent themselves. And so I want to read what Frankie said. I am so honored to be a part of this panel. I do have to go, but please keep in touch. Muchísimas gracias. So thank you, Frankie, for tuning in and being part of our panel. So we are running low on time, but I did want to bring up a question that a parent brought up, and maybe one of you can answer this. I muted myself. I don't think we have the time for everyone to answer it, but I do want to bring it up. The parent states, she's the parent of an 18-year-old trans daughter, and they want to hear about how to approach name and gender change with doctors and other spaces. How do you know when to use which name? Who wants to address that?
Do they say what state?
No, they didn't. I think it's more just general, right? Like, how do you know when to kind of present yourself with doctors and other spaces, right?
Bueno, yo creo que en ese momento político el Estado influye mucho en cómo sería esa relación. Sí, hay muchas leyes que han sido introducidas, muchas que no han pasado, algunas que están pendientes, que han pasado algunas de las cámaras. Yo creo que dependiendo del estado hay una diferente relación en cuanto a cómo relacionarse con el sistema médico. Yo creo que en general si la pregunta es, bueno, yo cómo apoyo a mi hija navegando este sistema médico, entendiendo que quizás el marcador de género no ha sido cambiado o el nombre no ha sido oficialmente cambiado, no haya sido cambiado legalmente, es continuar utilizando el nombre que tu hija prefiere, la identidad con la que ella se identifica, darle validez y si estás con un doctor, una doctora, un doctore, decir, sí, mi hija, y reforzar, ella es mi hija, ella es mi niña, yo estoy aquí con ella, y continuar como enforzando eso. Ahora, sí, por cuestiones legales, a veces sí tienen que tener los documentos que diga en el nombre que está en el ID, puedes llamar a mi hija con el nombre que ella prefiere, o si de pronto, si llegan a un lugar de emergencia, porque me pasó a mí cuando me caí, decirle a la persona que está en el front desk, en la secretaría, hey, por favor, si vas a llamar mi nombre, puedes decir mi apellido, en vez de decir el nombre completo. Oye, pues ella es mi hija, yo quiero que en este espacio ella se sienta cómoda porque está sanando o necesita apoyo médico, puedes decir el apellido en vez del nombre o este es el nombre que ella prefiere utilizar, pero siempre como padres, madres, personas que son responsables por las niñas, siempre como hacer esa abogacía, porque si los doctores ven que la madre o el padre están respondiendo de esa manera, entonces van a ser mucho más abiertos a a respetar la identidad de la niña.
I do want to ask this question, you know, because the whole purpose of this talk is to really celebrate our joy, our existence, you know, and celebrate ourselves, that we're here, right? And I want to ask you, you know, what brings you joy, and what are ways that you practice healing?
I could go with that. Cooking, baking, especially for community. I love being able to cook something and deliver it to folks, or bake something. It was something that I was doing a lot during the pandemic. I make a really good soy ceviche, and I have a lot of vegan and vegetarian friends. I cannot eat soy ceviche. I can't have it, but I love making it to my friends. I love just like deliberating it and seeing their faces. It makes me really happy just being able to see them and smile. There's times that I won't even like tell them that I'm making it for them. Like I just make it and then surprise them. Like I'm like, there's a delivery outside your door. So it's really cool getting those text messages back. It's like Marixa says, it's famous as soon as I say soy ceviche. Everyone wants to have some. So it's been good to have like it makes me happy when I'm in the kitchen. I really connect. It's the way that I connect with my nana and my great nana. It's like they never got to see me grow, but I got to learn to cook with them in the kitchen, and that connection makes me really happy. That's part of my joy.
Now I want some ceviche, soy ceviche. Gareth, how about you?
Bueno, a mí me llena mucho de alegría, dar mucho, me llena compartir con tiempo de calidad con las personas que quieren compartir conmigo. Me gusta, soy papá de una gata que tiene 14 años conmigo, así que está volviendo al ciclo en el que es bebé, así que la adoro, la quiero muchísimo, la celo muchísimo. Me trae alegría limpiar, mantener mi hogar limpio, me sana. Y sí, mantener los vínculos con las personas que son cercanas a mí, mantenerlos siempre cerca, siempre bien, y no sé, vivir me llena. A veces en el momento en el que estoy ahora, ¿verdad? Me estoy exponiendo mucho a la visibilidad como hombre trans. Entonces, hay veces que las personas que están cerca de mí les da un poco de miedo. So, me hace feliz, pero me hace feliz. Y entonces ellos ven en mí esa felicidad de ser quien soy y de con eso poder ayudar personas mucho menores que yo, que es básicamente la población que se impacta Así que nada, realmente como dar un poquito, poner un granito de alegría en el mundo, me hace feliz a mí.
I think it's obvious, climbing. I think climbing has done so much for me, and you know, I think as a trans person, I think I always struggle with feeling connected to my body, staying present with myself, and climbing gave me that chance to feel my body, to think about my movement, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna reach for these. This is how this movement feels for me. And, you know, I think any sport can do that, but I think for me, climbing was what made it happen. It made me reconnect with my identity, with my trans identity. And what's really funny is, like, I'm an organizer by trade, like that's my life. And so climbing, even though it's my hobby, is my joy, is my, you know, what brings me high when I'm low. It now became an organizing project. And now is a crew of friends, and you know, it's 8 of us. We're a crew of Black Indigenous people, migrants, who we are, you know, like creating access to affordable gyms and to transition from climbing at the gym to transition safely outdoors. And many times, you know, it's the first time people are climbing outdoors, is sometimes the first time people are hiking, sometimes the first time people are camping. And to be honest, like part of the reason why I do this is because climbing brought so much joy for me that I want to make sure my people are able to access it too. So if y'all come to New York and you want to climb, please let me take you out. But yeah. Thank you all for sharing your joys. This was a really sweet question.
I can take you up on that, Mateo. I've never tried climbing, but I do like going outside. I think, you know, especially with everything going on right now, working on my spirituality is what brings me joy, right? Like connecting with nature, being outside, you know, being with community, being in these spaces. It just, you know, it just felt like recently with everything that we're hearing in the news and the constant attacks on our existence, right? It's hard for us to keep still, you know, to ground ourselves and just to take care of ourselves, right? And so creating intentional spaces to remind ourselves of what brings us joy, you know, and how we practice healing is important, because that's how we keep going forward, right? Like that's how we keep moving, and movement is life, right? And so we have to remember that it's, you know, there's joy in our lives, that you know, our community is out there, that support is out there, and that there's hope, right? So thank you for everyone who's shared their joys and ways of healing. I do want to ask, you know, because everyone is doing important work out in the community, you know, what is one thing that you or your group are building towards, and what are you looking forward to?
Acá en Puerto Rico estamos tratando de, ya tenemos un proyecto que se llama COPTA, y es para papás trans o mamás trans. ¿Verdad? Abrimos la invitación a familias diversas también, pero la meta es poder ayudar a estos padres o madres que, ¿verdad?, decidieron antes o después de la transición ser papás, y entonces, ¿verdad?, ayudándolos con cuidado, con integrarse a la sociedad, con que se reconozcan como personas, que no porque tengan hijos no pueden hacer ciertas cosas, así que estamos incluyéndolos. Mañana tenemos un evento de visibilidad bien bonito, espero poder grabarlo y enviárselo a todos por email. Vamos a tirar una bandera bien grande de una parte de Puerto Rico y en el medio le escribimos existimos. Va a ser un evento bien lindo y prontamente desarrollando, ¿verdad? Buscando los lazos correctos para lograr un proyecto de lo que hablé ahorita, de buscar las bases, lo básico primero, antes de lograr otras cosas o querer alcanzar otras cosas, darle salud mental, salud física, higiene, buena higiene, hogar, comida a estos chicos y chicas que están en su camino de transición, se quedan en la calle y así que estamos tenemos unos cuantos proyectos que queremos empujar, ¿verdad? Que no se nos quede ninguna parte de la comunidad, no porque sean papás, no porque sean mayores, no porque sean niños, o sea, no porque sean jóvenes, no porque no estén en mi rango de edad, ¿verdad? Que no se sientan incluidos. Así que vamos creando poquito a poco. Gracias.
Go ahead. So for us, of course, you know, like we have our support group for Trans Latinx men. We are doing it a little more in Spanglish now, not just Spanish. And I think mainly just because it helps a little bit of the folks in the community that have been here much longer. But we're also trying right now to fundraise and work. So we'll be having a couple of events here in the Bay Area. We're still working on the dates for fundraisers because we really want to put together a mental and health retreat for trans men, where we're going to be trying to do workshops where we are going to be addressing, again, making sure that we're talking about the toxic masculinity sometimes that stays within our community, especially after we transition. What are the things that we're taking with us, and how do we make sure we leave those behind, especially to be better partners to our friends and our community and our family. And I think those are important conversations that we need to be having. Also workshops on how to deal with anger, right? Those are things that we usually don't have a conversation, but we know that it exists. So how do we talk about those? There's a couple of other things, workshops that we want to have during that weekend, but I think our biggest goal right now is try to make sure that we fundraise the money for this retreat and hopefully be able to invite enough trans guys in our community to attend.
That sounds rad. I would love to join planting that there. Yeah, I mean, I think so. We have a couple of events, but I think policy-wide, we are pushing for a bill in the state of New York that is called Stop Violence in the Sex Trades Act. This bill will decriminalize the purchase and the selling of sexual services. It will also allow for sex workers to work together, because currently under New York state law, even if you leave with a sex worker and you haven't reported them, you can also go to jail. So we are going to be changing the penal code to decriminalize those codes so that sex workers actually are able to have a community and not be isolated. The bill also includes a expungement and vacature of records so that people are able to remove that from their background and access programs for housing or employment without those questions. And so that is and also in the efforts of reducing police encounters with community members, because we know that one of the main ways in which people, our folks, particularly trans women here in New York, are being put in detention is because of interaction with the policing system. So this bill will prevent that direct connection. So that is one bill in the state level. And then in the city level, we're creating we're working on a sex workers bill of rights that will provide protections for sex workers. And because we understand that not everyone in our communities is a sex worker or interested in doing sex work, or might do sex work only part-time and not full-time, we also are working on introducing a legislation in the city level for an employment quota. And we're working on the name, by the way. But the idea is so that the city employs at least 6% of their like agency like vacant spaces for TGNC and B folks, so trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming folks, and gender diverse. But that it not only comes with like hiring folks, but at training that sustain their success in that employment. And we're trying to figure out also how to make sure that there is no requirements for educational levels, no requirements for language, because we want to make sure that like trans Latinx folks who are monolingual Spanish speakers can also have access to those forms of employment. So that is a legislation we're currently drafting to present hopefully in the next year or so. So those are some of the projects that we're working on. Yeah.
Thank you all. So we are at time, and you know, I want to thank you again for joining us in our conversation today. It was a great discussion. Thank you to our panelists, to Frankie, who had to leave early. We will be sharing more information. This is a recording as well, so please follow Somos Familia. Thank you, Mateo, for sharing your contact information on the chat. But follow Somos Familia to get more information of how to get involved and to follow these amazing organizations and individuals, as well as Grupo Apoyo Phoenix, to learn more about how you can get involved and support our trans family members. And so thank you again for having us and for listening in. See you next time.
Thank you, Pao. Thank you for facilitating.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
everyone.